We also have to deal with the code is law meme, which floats around in crypto social media and among some of the less educated or less acquainted with legal regulation parts of the industry. And this is sort of a bastardization of Professor Lessig's observations about the internet. What Professor Lessig said was that there are structural differences about the internet that may require the law to adapt around it. Classic example is people can basically tell in the real world whether they're being followed. On the internet, it's very difficult to tell whether there is someone who is surveilling your movements, because the structure of the internet generally does not allow a user who's using a web browser to understand whether someone is tracking them. We obviously have created laws that allow for people to understand whether they're being tracked, that indeed require people to disclose if they're tracking them. That's what all these policies that talk about cookies and all the rest are about. And so folks in the crypto industry have taken this code is law idea and kind of twisted it around to take the position that people can create systems that limit the powers of their participants. And that because the system limits the power of those participants, whatever the system allows is all the participants can do. But this is a kind of misunderstanding of the way that these systems work, for the simple reason that all of these systems include people. And people are still legally cognizable, and people are still subject to laws. In fact, so are computers. So are people who host computers, people who operate computers, and people who provide services in order to support these blockchain networks. So although the idea of code is law is interesting, and it may be something that we would want to strive towards, the current state of affairs does not necessarily support code is law for reasons that we get into in this presentation. If a party decides that they're going to use a system that restrains their powers on the system, we get to the philosophical question of whether we should want parties to ask courts to reverse things that happen on those systems. Perfect example is a Bitcoin user who fails to properly protect their private key. In this particular instance, let's say that David has a Bitcoin private key that controls the Yermak family fortune. Somebody shoulder surfs David, sees his key, takes it down, and divests the family fortune of their holdings. To Bitcoin, there is nothing wrong with the transaction that occurred. All Bitcoin cares about is, was a properly formed message causing a transaction of value submitted to the network? And was it confirmed? In this hypothetical I just addressed, the Bitcoin system doesn't really care who's using that key or why. David, understandably, would be a little bit unhappy about this because no one wants to lose the Yermak family fortune. And he would likely attempt to figure out who shoulder surfed him and took away his assets. And so there would likely be a claim for conversion or a criminal case brought for theft under those circumstances. But the key distinction here is the system didn't care why. The law that governs the people cares why. And so I think that most people who are advocating for code is law may actually find that they don't want what they're asking for. Or it could be that we actually do want systems that are created using these webs of smart contracts to be immune from law altogether.